Internet! Welcome to episode 203 of the Assorted Calibers podcast, the Second Amendment podcast that is a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and with me, as always, is my amazing hostess, Erin Paulette. How you doing, Erin?
I'm angry. I'm sick to my stomach and sick in my heart. And I have been dreading this show for pretty much the last week. So I'm not looking forward to it. I don't want to do it, but it needs to be done. So I'm sorry, man. I can't sustain the hi everybody. I know that's part of your opening shtick, and I'm not going to fault you for it, but I can't do it.
Yep. No, I got you. I mean, I'm feeling the same way. I mean, it's almost, honestly speaking, I was thinking as I was doing the intro, I'm doing it on muscle memory. The big energy start. I am not feeling it as well on the fact that this is a really, really grim episode. So honestly speaking, if it's all right with you, Erin, let's just cut to the chase and talk about what needs to get talked about.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Do our damn jobs.
Okay.
Of course, what Erin and I are talking about is, of course, the shooting in Uvalde, Texas, and it's a mess. I mean, you guys know all the basics that every news station on earth is talking about. Gunman went into Robb Elementary School, barricaded himself in a classroom and killed most of the people in that classroom before they finally made entry and killed the shooter. And that's the Cliff Notes version, but it goes worse than that. And as just to make matters worse, of course, all the anti-gun voices out there are demanding more gun control and pointing fingers at lovely people like Erin and I and you for owning guns and owning scary guns and quote-unquote assault weapons and all of that, as if that would have made a difference. Well, what I'm not hearing a whole heck of a lot about is exactly what went down that day, as far as what made it different than just about every other school shooting.
Cowardice, incompetence, criminal negligence. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna get on my soapbox for a bit. Since Columbine, it has been standard procedure for police departments. If there's an active shooter, then time is of the essence. You go in, you make a hard entry, you engage the shooter. If you do nothing else, you distract him and he's busy returning fire with the cops instead of killing innocent people. That's procedure. That's the way they are trained. So, 2016, Pulse Massacre. Gunman goes in. Police don't make an immediate entry. They set up a perimeter. They wait, and they give the gunman not only enough time to murder people in Pulse, but he manages to Google how to unjam his jammed rifle so he can kill more people. 2018, Parkland, Marjorie Stoneman High School. There's an active shooter. Again, the police set up a perimeter and don't go in, and more people die while they stand around with their thumbs up their asses. Uvalde, Texas, 2022. There's an active shooter. What do the police do? Well, obviously not their fucking jobs. They oh my God. And when I was hearing this last week, I was telling myself, okay, we're still within like the 72-hour window of rumor, and things haven't been verified, and surely this is hyperbole, something, and it's fake info, it's rumor, this can't be true. And oh my God, as it went on, it seemed like everything came true. There may have been small little details which aren't true, but the vast majority of it does appear to be true. The police stood around and well, actually, I'm a bit fuzzy on the timeline. I don't know if officers went in and got their kids and left other kids to die and then stood around, or if they went in between. I don't know, but they were standing around, not doing their jobs, while people were calling 911 and saying, "We're still alive, please come help us." The police saved their own kids, but didn't save other kids. There were parents who were willing to go in on their own, risk their own lives, unarmed, and say, "Just let us go after our kids," and the police arrested them. There was one woman, I don't know her name, they arrested her, they handcuffed her somehow, God bless her. She got out of the handcuffs, got past the police, went in, got her kids, and came out. She's a hero as far as I'm concerned. I am so angry about this right now. I understand that it has gone before SCOTUS several times that the police do not have a legal responsibility to save you, and I understand why that ruling exists. Star Trek transporters don't exist. The police cannot arrive instantly. If the police were legally responsible to save you, then if they didn't show up in time because traffic, because they just can't physically get through space fast enough, then you could conceivably sue them. I understand that. But there needs to be some sort of law that says you can't sit around and do nothing, you fools. You can't just let innocent people die. I understand that you can set a departmental policy, but that isn't enough. I'm going to be honest right now. I want blood. Literal would be nice, but, I'll settle for figurative. I want these cops to never work again. I want them to carry the shame around with them for the rest of their lives. I want their names to be mud. And if people have asked me, well, Erin, what would you do? And I would say, I want to return to tradition. Traditional Roman discipline. When a unit mutinied or showed cowardice or generally needed to be punished really badly, but the Romans didn't feel that it was appropriate to kill everyone, as in they wanted the unit to remain somewhat combat effective, but they wanted to send a message. They would institute the discipline known as decimation. Now, a lot of people hear decimate and they think it means to destroy utterly, and that's incorrect. That's the way it's been used for a decade or more, but it's incorrect. It's Roman. Decimus, like where we get the decimal system for 10. Decimation. What they do is they divide people up in groups of 10, and I don't really know how they do it, if it was by lot or random or whatever, but basically it was like, okay, every 10th person is going to be stripped naked and beaten to death, and guess what? You other 9 are going to do it. Here are the clubs. So not only is this 10th person killed in a very slow and painful and brutal way, but it's on your head. You did the killing, and honestly, this is your responsibility because, you mutinied, you showed cowardice, you didn't do as you were told to do, and you now have to carry the scar with you for the rest of your life. So one person dies, 9 people are psychologically scarred, and it sends a message. I realize this is incredibly harsh. Remember, this is the same culture that came up with crucifixion. I cannot think of any incident in which I would think decimation was appropriate other than this. So I'm letting you know I am not coming to this decision easily. But this is such gross dereliction of duty, abdication of responsibility, just callous, wanton disregard for the lives of others. I mean, for God's sake, you become a police officer. Your job is to run towards the gunfire. Yes, you should make it I'm not saying, throw your life away. We want you to come home safely, but the job does entail, if you have to give your life to save others, then you do it. And if you can't do that, you aren't fit for the job. And the Uvalde Police Department, they are not fit for the job. And I don't know if it was cowardice or if it was, someone on the scene, an officer said, don't do it, and the others blindly went along with it. I can't understand that. All of the good officers I know would have said, screw that, I'm going in. You can fire me later. I just can't understand how all of them would do nothing. And oh, their kids are good enough to save, but other people's, well, no, they can die. And we'll arrest the parent. It's... Yeah.
So many things I'm thinking about is I will say there was one time when I was working at a company, and the company did not have the forethought to put the silly legal crap on the, even lawfully carried weapons are against company policy, you'll be terminated. There was no weapons policy. You couldn't fight with other employees. You couldn't be drinking on the job. It was in the handbook. Nothing about weaponry. So, hey, I got a carry permit. I'm going to carry my gun. And I will also say at this job, I've talked a little bit about it in other venues, there were some personnel issues, specifically actually related to mental illness. Like a person had, someone who I was actually friends with had a real bad mental breakdown, I guess you could say. And it was scary. And one thing I was that popped into my head was, it always was, hey, if I'm in the mall with my wife or my kid and I hear gunshots coming from further inside the mall, what do? I turn around and I walk to the nearest exit. I go away from the gunfire. It's not my job as the police. It's my job to protect my family, and I'm going to take us to safety. In that instance, in that office with it was probably an office of about 30 some people. And I knew pretty much for a fact, I was the only person that had a firearm in that building. And it was one of those, I don't think I could live with myself knowing that I took off out a service exit into the parking lot, into safety, and then later read the news about them all getting wiped out. Mm-hmm. I would have to go towards the gunfire, or
at the very least lead them out. It's okay to retreat if you are leading other people to safety as well.
Yep. But just being the, until the police arrive, I'm it. And so, and it's granted, I will also say at the time I worked here, I didn't have a kid. That changes a lot of stuff. And also it never came down to that. So I don't know. I might have gotten scared and ran away, and that's fine. But also I wasn't company security. I was just a lab rat. And just the fact that these people swear to serve and protect, and to just sit there while there's 911 calls coming in and while they're hearing gunshots on the other side of the door, it is infuriating. And all of this just abject incompetence and nonsense, and you're going to blame a rifle. So yeah, I mean, honestly speaking, I think we've covered a lot of that. One other thing about this I wanted to point out is clearly this person was severely mentally ill. I mean, there's a lot of signs of a real bad mental illness, and including what kind of person would slaughter children. It's just not just any sort of human behavior. But I posted a link. It's actually, I was looking for an older article, but it's essentially got warmed over in light of this. But an article where it is talking about how mental health people have been interviewed or actually asked to review the case files of various spree killers. Be it the killer at the mall in Aurora, the movie theater in Aurora, Colorado, or any of these school shooters and other spree killing events and go over the psych profile. And I believe that it was a double blind study. So it was masked patient names, and there were some patients that were people that never were violent, and some patients that were these killers that make the news. And they couldn't predict which people were violent and which weren't. And I mean, I have family members, I have friends who have struggled with mental illness who have never caused any major problems besides just the standard drama and trials and tribulations of someone who's really going through a tough time. And so to say this is really all about mental illness, I think the mental health system in the United States absolutely needs work. On a personal note, there's actually two, we'll say family members. Some may not be of direct blood relation to me, but they're family who are currently going through some mental health crisis, and they're trying to get help. And one of these people is of means. They are living quite comfortably, and they've got a lot of resources at hand. Another one is of very, very modest means, and both of them are absolutely struggling to get the help that they need. And that's just it boggles the mind that we're at this place in this country. But also, I don't know how we can help a lot of people by fixing the mental health system in the United States, but I don't think we could fix this. There just doesn't seem to be the evidence that says that would go through. But in the instance of the police, we have proven tactical knowledge of how these situations go down and how it works. And we have instances where police officers were brave and went through, or private citizens engaged the killer, and it absolutely turned the tables, and things got better after that good guy engagement happened. Mm-hmm. And then furthermore, we've got policies where schools essentially get locked down the moment class starts. And I got no problem with this, because what good do you have to allow lots of people to come and go throughout a school while kids are learning? It's distracting, and it could potentially be dangerous. And this is Texas in May. So you also want to keep that lovely air conditioning in. And yet, meanwhile, the front door to the school was propped open, and the classroom where this massacre occurred was also unlocked until the killer came in and locked it. So it was capable of being locked. And just why? And there was warning. There was both the 911 call from, I don't know if it was directly from the killer's grandmother, but the killer's grandmother was the first person to be shot. And they may still be alive at the time, but they certainly were able to get out and notify neighbors of their grandson's criminal intent. And so that call was out. They crashed their truck near the school. So there was an auto crash, and there were 911 calls about the crash. And he shot at people who were across the street at a funeral home. The moment somebody is shooting, why wasn't that school locked down like a bank vault?
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that. No one does.
Nobody does. And I'm just talking about these things really just to bring awareness. So the Brady campaign has a podcast, Red, Blue, and Brady, and they did a podcast this week about this shooting and the shooting in Buffalo. And they opened up with, evidently one of the members of the Brady campaign is the team that was there is from Buffalo originally, and actually knew the off-duty police officer, or the retired police officer who was acting as a security guard that engaged the shooter. And she told stories about the neighborhood and all of that stuff, and then read the names of the victims. And, you know, it was very touching. I've got no complaints about that whatsoever. And then one of the hosts came on and said, if you want to act, we have a petition in the show notes for where you can sign a petition about universal background checks. And then later on in the podcast, after talking about this shooting in Texas, they started talking about universal background checks. Both killers bought their guns at gun shops and cleared a background check. You're just dancing in the blood. You are just using that blood as political capital, and it's disgusting.
So, you mentioned that the only way to stop this is to go in, and sometimes it's a private citizen. And this is the one bit of good news that has happened this past week. And so, a woman with a pistol, a lawful concealed carrier, was able to stop a spree shooting in Charleston. Now, I have to... Unfortunately, I have to qualify this, because the good news is no one was injured, let alone killed, other than the shooter. But that means technically it's not a spree shooting. So I've mentioned this before, how our opponents get to win no matter what happens. You know, if enough people had been hurt to qualify it for a spree shooting, then it wouldn't matter that she shot the gunman. It didn't stop a spree shooting. But so she shot him before he could hurt anyone, but now it's not a spree shooting, and I hate that. But briefly, here's what happened. There was this, I suppose I should say troubled man, but I really want to say evil, who was speeding through an apartment complex where children were playing, and people told him, hey, you should stop doing that. And he decided that he didn't like being told what to do, and came back with an AR-15 and started shooting at people that were attending a party. Reports here aren't clear whether it's a birthday party or a graduation party, but he was literally shooting into a crowd of innocent people. There was a woman attending the party. She quickly drew her weapon, fired at him, fatally wounded him. No one else was injured. This is literally the best case scenario we can hope for in this particular situation. The only reason I'm saying this woman is because I don't yet know her name. And she may not want her name to be known, and I will respect that. But if I ever find out her name, I am going to be saying nothing but good things about her. Because like we mentioned last week, don't say the name of the killers, but absolutely say the name of the people who stop them.
Yeah, and actually you talking about the catch-22, and I will take it a chance to kill two birds with one stone, is you have the church shooting that happened in Texas where Stephen Williford heard the shooting and jumped out in his bare feet with an AR-15 and a box of loose ammo, and he was literally pressing rounds into the magazine as he was jumping out. Hopefully, he has learned to keep a few magazines loaded and ready to go for such an instance. But managed to come out, saw the killer coming out of the church, and note he had weapons and ammunition in his truck, so there is a theory that he might have been going to someplace else. So it is definitely not necessarily closing the door after the horses have gotten out. But Stephen Williford took cover behind another vehicle and engaged the shooter and fatally wounded him. He drove off, but he succumbed to his wounds before he could do any more harm to either another church or another venue or to law enforcement officers trying to apprehend him. And Stephen Williford is a hero. And then there is this also was White Settlement, Texas, I believe, was the other church shooter, the guy that walked in with a shotgun. That was Texas as well, right? With Jack Wilson?
I think so, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, but essentially, shooter got in. They only killed, I believe, one or two people. But again, one of the parishioners was was volunteering as a security guard and also was an owner of a gun range and a very good shot. And from a long range, headshot this guy and took him down properly before he could hurt anybody else. And of course, the shooting where Stephen Willeford put an end to it was considered a mass shooting. I mean, it was terrible. And the other one was not a mass shooting. Casualties were minimized by this. And both men are equally heroes. Both men took the advantages of the opportunities that they were given. Stephen Willeford did not have the advantage of being inside the church at the time. And so they do the catch-22. Yeah, the Stephen Willeford wasn't able to stop a mass shooter. He was a mass shooter, but also Jack Wilson wasn't stopping a mass shooter because he isn't a mass shooter till he kills the people. So it's a catch-22. But let's be honest, the guy with the shotgun that walked in and this guy with an AR-15 who was firing indiscriminately at a crowd, what was he planning on doing?
Mm-hmm.
This was absolutely a mass shooting. It was not allowed to be a mass shooting thanks to the brave action of this unnamed woman.
So you mentioned Dancing in the Blood, and when I hear Dancing in the Blood, I think of Robert Francis O'Rourke. So I don't have much to say about it. I'm going to let you do most of this. All I'm going to say is I love the fact that when Beto crashed this, I'm not really sure what you would call it, a press meeting?
It was a press conference, but I would say it was also a town meeting.
Yeah,
because it was done in an auditorium. It was the day after the shooting,
mm-hmm.
and it was really for the families to grieve and the families to ask
mm-hmm.
questions. And Governor Abbott was there and made himself quite available.
Yeah, and the mayor of Uvalde. And of course, Beto decides, now's the perfect time to make this all about myself. And so he walks in, he starts... I didn't watch it. I couldn't make myself watch the video, but he basically makes a spectacle of himself, and he starts asking questions and demanding accountability, and you're doing nothing and pointing fingers. And so the mayor of Uvalde says, "You're a sick son of a bitch," which is just delicious.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe you're a sick son of a bitch who would come to a deal like this to make a political issue. He
mm-hmm.
shouted. And then Beto was thrown out. I don't think he was physically thrown out. I believe he was escorted.
he was physically removed.
I'm sure he was physically removed, but see,
there was not a yeet involved, unfortunately.
Yes. I doubt that he struggled. He probably went along when they escorted him out.
Well, there was several. There were several. I don't know if they were Texas Rangers or just town police officers or either way. But there were police officers who were acting as security, and there was at least 4 of them. And so, in the words of Ron White, I don't know how many of them it would take to kick my ass, but I knew how many they were going to use. And we know that Beto O'Rourke has never been confused with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. So I suspect he didn't know better enough to that this was a bad idea. But he did know well enough that fighting with the officers probably wouldn't have ended well for him. And honestly speaking, it reeks of desperation. I mean, he is running for governor against Governor Abbott, and his poll numbers are in the absolute toilet. And I really don't think this is going to help him much at all. I think the only people that are impressed by this, and there are some, I've seen, I watched the YouTube video of it, and there were several, and actually I think I first saw it on Twitter, and there were several people that were praising Beto for speaking his truth and things like that. But I think that those are the type of people who would never vote for Greg Abbott, no matter what, or who was running against him. And So he's got, I mean, obviously there is the, there are absolute, very left-wing Democrats in Texas who would never support a Republican. So there is a base for Beto, but I don't see him gaining any support from that in this spectacle. And I certainly see him losing even remotely consideration from some of the more centrist people of Texas.
Yeah, not that our blogger friend Law Dog can be considered centrist. I mean, he's not like far radical right, but, he's a former police officer. He's got a fair bit of conservatism in him. But he lives in Texas, and I think he's got a good take on the current political pulse there. And according to Law Dog, that little act of Beto's cost him the race. Not that he may have won beforehand, but he definitely is not going to win now.
Yeah, and you know what? Let's move on to another lighthearted story. I saw this, and I'm trying to remember. I might have even seen this before the shooting even went down. I went, "Oh, this will be cute for the show." It seems a little, well, it's not frivolous because, it is a serious issue, but, I'm finding a hard time, drawing up the appropriate amount of, ire and scorn for how silly this is. But a ghost gun mill was uncovered in Boston, including a 3D printer.
Dun, dun, dun!
And they have got the most ridiculous junk on the bunk photo ever. I mean, there's a whole bunch of, and it's, the photo's not good enough for me to tell how many of these receivers are complete receivers. And there's certainly, they did the let's magnify it a little bit by taking the jigs for the 80% kits and putting them separate from the 80% piece of polymer that they were using. And they've got, the drill bits and the end mills, and they've got what looks like magazine springs. I'm not really sure, but there's
those are definitely AR-15 buffer springs there on the left. And in the upper right, there's the suspect's smartphone. Why?
I mean, it's just ridiculous, and it would be further amusing to know how many of these were actually complete, and furthermore, like how many did they have the amount? I'm trying to look. I'm seeing a bunch of what look like Glock receivers, but they talked about, well, let's just read it down. They recovered 19 plastic lower pistol receivers of various colors.
Because the color is important.
Yes. 3 lower receiver mold red. I don't think those are receiver molds. I think those are jigs, but I could be wrong. Let's see. 2 high capacity magazines, which are illegal. 2 magazine springs. So yeah, those aren't buffer. I think those are AR-15 magazine springs. But 2 magazine springs because yes, it's a spring. 1 Taurus slide for a 380 caliber firearm. 1 Sky 9mm slide for a firearm. Numerous small internal firearms parts. Yes, they definitely felt the need to document, mag releases and ejectors and strikers and striker springs. 34 40 caliber bullets, not even a round number, not even a full box. 31 9mm bullets, 14 of 380 caliber bullets, and 469 22 caliber bullets. Erin, they say they can travel over a mile. 4 plastic lower rifle receivers, 2 plastic rifle rails, literally furniture, and 2 plastic rifle grips. Yes, the pistol grips, the evil, deadly pistol grip. Plastic firearm replica with the firing pin loaded with a live round. I don't even know what that means. A 3D printer. Oddball beware. Approximately 3 grams of a white powder, which is interesting given that they're not saying what it is. It's just a white powder. It could be printer stuff. It could be drugs.
Well, much earlier in the article, it says that he was arrested at the scene and charged with trafficking in fentanyl.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be that, but they said it's unknown.
Yep. Suboxone strips. I believe that's one of the anti-overdose drugs, but I may be wrong off the top of my head. One 9mm firearm magazine. Doesn't say it's high capacity, so it might be a 10-round limited magazine. Mm-hmm. One .380 firearm magazine located by one high point .380 caliber firearm slide. Mm-hmm. Oh,
yes. Suboxone is a medication which is used to treat opioid addiction.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, this was an amazing raid that the Boston police uncovered. Oh, the lives that they saved.
I mean, yeah, from what I can tell, it sounds like he was a bad guy. He was trafficking in drugs and other things. So I'm not going to say this was necessarily a bad bust, but the hysteria with which they breathlessly report these components, I didn't find, maybe I missed it as you were reading them out, but did they mention one fully operating firearm? I don't know that they did.
No, I did not. That certainly wasn't listed in there. That's exactly what I was getting. And certainly, like I said, they look like Glock receivers. At least a few of them look like Glock receivers, and there's no mention of any Glock parts. And they're definitely talking about things like slides and magazines and things like that. So yeah, I don't exactly know what this guy was up to. It doesn't look like he was particularly organized in his activities, and he's a bad guy. And I don't know if he was a felon before this was going through, given the ancillary stuff about being a drug dealer and all that. Chances are he's been caught before doing other bad stuff. And so that it doesn't matter if it's a 3D printer or they've got ghost guns and all that. Once it's a functional firearm and you can put it together and you can load a live round into it, you can charge them with a crime. Massachusetts does give the initial crimes of possession of ammunition without a license and the high capacity magazine laws that we have. But really, and in theory, Mara Healy, though I don't know if I would want to do it if I were her. She could go after him for the AR receivers and parts because they are quote unquote copycat assault weapons, even if they're not assembled. But that might be not something she wants to do at a time when she is running for governor. So yeah, this is really hysterical. And furthermore, I laugh at the police, but at the same time, yeah, this guy might be a really, really bad dude and might be someone who might be committing murders and all that. And we don't need any of the histrionics. Because we've already got laws in place.
What this reminds me of is something similar, like when the British police do a knife roundup, or they empty out one of their bins, and they're talking about how they're keeping people safe, and what they find are, there are very few examples of what you or I or Oddball would consider a knife, but it would be, okay, that's a flathead screwdriver. You know, why are you displaying that prominently as if it, I mean, okay, yeah, you could use it as a shiv, especially if you sharpen it, but, you know, you sharpen anything and you can use it as a stabbing weapon. You aren't covering yourself in glory by breathlessly reporting all of these tools that you have found. And that's really what this reminds me of.
Yeah, and you'll even see stuff like, you know, plastic flatware, like a plastic spoon, and a lot of these bins are in public. How do you know someone just didn't throw their garbage away in it, like people do? Certainly, here, talk to any mailman that empties the public mail bins. People absolutely use those things as trash cans. Yeah, so it's just a a total PR story. It was absolutely making the local news here. That's actually how I found it. Is I was actually just listening to the local news while I was cooking dinner, and they were talking about this like 3D printer uncovered in Boston. It might even been the national news. I'm trying to remember. And so I did a quick search of it and went, oh my goodness. So I put it in the show notes, and it turns out it's making a little bit of a palate cleanser for what has been an unpleasant show as far as the discussion goes. So in light of everything we've been talking about, I think one of the lessons we can learn from Uvalde is it can happen to you. I think this ties in very well to a topic Mickey Schuch and I discussed before this tragic event happened. So I am pleased to welcome back to the Assorted Calibers podcast, Mickey Schuch of Carry Trainer and the Higher Line podcast. And so, Mickey, we've just been talking a little bit before we started recording, and you told me that you're a carpenter, and you do a wide variety of different kinds of training. And I got to ask, like, how did you get to this place in your life?
First of all, Weer'd, thanks for having me back on. I appreciate it. I think so many things that we all have in our life, we're the sum total of the experiences, the people, the way our parents raised us. And I come from a huge family. My mom and dad, who just celebrated 47 years together, have 11 kids. So I'm one of the oldest of 11. And we became pretty self-sufficient as youngsters. Two stories I'll tell you out of the gate that really affected kind of my worldview. One of them is sadly the story of murder. A very close family friend. Her name was Beth. I don't tell this story often. I tell it because it paints a picture that I think is oftentimes not talked about in the way that I want to share about it. Beth was a wonderful girl, very close family friend. She was my older sister's best friend. And she was the kind of childhood friend where she was at our house daily. We went to school together. She was with us on holidays sometimes. And I got a phone call from my mother when I was 15 years old that Beth had perished in a fire. And I can remember hearing that, my mom calling me. I was visiting a friend on the other side of town. My mom said, you need to come home. There's been an accident or some type of calamity, and this girl had perished. And I can remember feeling like my ears ringing and this horrible sensation, as I think all of us in life have found out some horrible thing about a loved one. We've got a story like that. Well, what happened, we found out she didn't perish in a fire, but the man that raped her and stabbed her and killed her lit the house on fire to hide his deeds. And this man was a volunteer fireman, was a neighbor, and maybe was somewhat trusted. His name was Dale Kauke. Dale recently passed away in the state prison that he was housed in. He'd been locked up over 30 years. And I tell that story not because a gun would fix it, not because a weapon or possibly training would fix it. This was a 16-year-old girl. There's a lot of variables and things that come into play in an event like that. But I sat through the court proceedings as this man was on trial. By the time this happened, I was maybe 16 or 17 years old. And doing that, sitting there, staring at this man as he testified in his defense, changed kind of the way I viewed the world. Not that I didn't know there was bad in the world, but listening as the prosecutors talked about the specifics of what the investigators found at this crime scene. It was horrific. And it made me think, man, there are so many things that could have changed. Perhaps her not opening the door, perhaps her having a weapon, a place to fall back to in the house, perhaps understanding that even though she was smaller than this guy, there was ways that things could have changed. And I didn't spend my life what-ifing, but there's a million young ladies, young people, old people, etc., that are victims of violence like this. And almost every time, if you interview these people that are not killed, they think, I can't believe this is happening. And the thought can't be, I can't believe this is happening. The thought needs to be, this is happening. I will do as I've trained. I'll win. I'll live. I'll fight. I'll run. I'll hide. I'll survive. Whatever the training is, because you can't expect a 95-year-old woman to do the same thing a 20-year-old man would do in a situation. But whatever that is, that needs to be the on switch, the go switch. And that really became the basis of what all of our training programs are, instilling systems that help people not become statistics and victims, but instead those people can go on to have stories about how they not just survived, but won, how they won. Does that make sense? Weird?
Yeah. No, that does. That's kind of a catch-22 that I always kind of see when I'm reading or studying up on, say, criminal victim selection and all that, is that a lot of things that we do to protect ourselves, such as training in firearms, training in martial arts, situational awareness, and things like that, all of those things not only will give us the edge in the event that we are attacked, but as a general rule, it sends out a lot of signals to the predators out there that we're not the guy. We're not the person that's a victim. So we say having the gun isn't a magical talisman, but at the same time, having the gun and knowing how to use it will change how you interact with the world. And oftentimes enough that hopefully the bad guys will see that person walking down and going, ooh, that dude, he's walking straight up and his eyes are slower. Or that woman she made direct eye contact with me. She was looking at me. She was looking at my hands. Maybe
Sure.
not her. Maybe that person over there with their nose buried in their phone. That's going to be an easier mark.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think those are very specific instances. But then we also have to remember we are tired. Mm-hmm. We do get depressed. We do get hungry. We do get in a position where we're not the switched on Johnny paying attention to everything guy. That day comes to all of us. Mm-hmm. So then if you are caught, and let's be clear, guys like Chris Kyle, Navy SEAL, who we all have read about and have heard about, was murdered on a gun range on a sunny day, right? People that are extremely well trained. Muhammad Ali gets knocked down at some point. So in that moment, what training do you fall back on? Pilots don't wait until a plane is spinning out of control to figure out how to right the plane. And that, I think, is oftentimes the fallacy. And in this space, you have people that either take the training seriously, not based in fear, but based in the knowledge that the world does have bad things happen to good people. And then you have folks that say, well, in the moment, you're never really going to know what you're going to do. So that training's bull. That's a fallacy as well, because why train anything then? Don't have a fire drill. Don't go to a doctor that's ever practiced, because practicing is stupid, right? Of course, we need to practice things based on best practices, based on desired outcomes and what our goals are. So I think beyond just not being a victim or looking like a victim is, can I actually fight? Can I make good choices? Can I fight through pain, through injury, through fear? And that is oftentimes, I think, what separates winners from losers. I've heard people say, I just don't think I could continue fighting if I was shot or stabbed. When in reality, they should be using some self-talk, telling themselves, if I was ever in that situation, I will fight. My friend Jared Reston was shot multiple times. The first round that impacted him went through his face and exited out his neck. And Jared tells this story to police officers around the country. We've got a video of me interviewing him, talking about it. And he tells cops, if I ever am in that situation again, I'll never know I lost, meaning he'll fight until the lights go out. Mm-hmm. It won't be quitting. That's the thing. I think that oftentimes trainers that are talking about firearm skills negate talking about. One, maybe they're not comfortable talking about it. And two, I don't know. You said magic chalisement. I think sometimes folks just fixate on that specific tool, and that's it. I've checked the box. I've got this gun. I've got this thing in my pants. Now I'm good to go. I tell students all the time, I've got friends like my buddy Paul Sharp or Z Durham, men that you should be fearing. These guys don't care that you have a gun. Of course, they're not bulletproof, but chances are your gun's not going to change much with some of these men that are out there. And these are good men. What about the evil ones? And there's plenty of evil guys that are not scared of your gun either.
I mean, that's a absolutely great primer on mindset, and I'm sure you teach that heavily in your training courses.
I do. I don't think you should have one without the other. Mm-hmm. I think there's a time and a place to just look at mechanical skills, whatever it is. Fred Astaire probably learned to dance or learn some movements before he went on stage and did big movies or whatever. Some listeners probably don't even know who Fred Astaire is, but just what I'm saying is it's not, you could be the greatest gun handler in the world. And there's professional shooters that are top level competitive pistol shooters. And those guys will tell you they don't even carry a gun. So there's got to be a mindset coupled to that.
So actually this pops into my head. What is your opinion of, and I think you'll know exactly what I'm talking about women's self-defense courses? And I say that with a certain amount of stink and with some scare quotes around that. The type of stuff that might be taught in the basement of your local library, where there's a lot of thoroughly debunked things of just kick him in the groin, scratch him in the eyes, stick your car keys between your fingers.
Most of it's all bull.
Exactly. But do you feel that there is some value in that simply because of the mindset angle?
I think let's clarify mindset. Mindset is your dominating attitude, right? It's the dominating operating system that you've created for your worldview. A negative person has a mindset. A homeless person has a mindset. A drug addict has a mindset. A billionaire that scratched $1 billion out of the earth with his two hands or her two hands has a mindset. So showing up for a weekend course to be exposed to some training is never a bad thing. Just like going to a 8-hour block of instruction on CPR is not a bad thing. I have a CPR dummy, a couple of them that we keep at the house. I think people should train that every quarter. Get the dummies out. They cost a few $100 and brush up on those skills. When it comes to interpersonal violence, dealing with somebody where you are using force to protect life and liberty, should we allow, or rather, should we put that something that's that valuable, that important, where life and limb are on the line, should we rest that into a couple hours or a couple days of training? Everybody would say no. Do I want to fly with somebody at my next cross-country trip, some pilot that's got a weekend of training? Everybody would say no. Do you want to go to a surgeon that's had a weekend of training? Clearly no. And you're not going to find somebody that is proficient in interpersonal combat, violence between two humans, that have trained for a couple of days. Then let's add to that the fact that nature is conspiring against a woman when it comes to violence against a larger aggressor. Women have smaller muscles, smaller bones. They're, no matter what anybody says, by and large, they're weaker with less lung capacity, less cardiovascular capacity. They can move less weight, shorter distances than an average man. Even the strongest women in the world really are about as strong as an average male. And this is not to be sexist or anything remotely like that. But knowing that, your training needs to be extremely robust. My gym, Alpha BJJ in my town, we've got a gal named Kasha. She's a badass jiu-jitsu practitioner. She's a badass MMA fighter. And she's been working through a multi-month instructional course for women. And really what it is it's a primer on all things fighting. And these girls come in and they train for several hours at a crack a few times a week. And what it's doing is it's exposing them. There's a lot of courses out there, not just the basement self-defense course, but there's gun courses. There's courses like close contact gunfighting. And a lot of times, and I have friends that teach this stuff and their material's excellent. But what often happens, this is how I describe it, is the student is paying to find out that they suck at fighting. If I show up at, for example, my friend Craig Douglas's ECQC course, for most people that have never wrestled, grappled, done jujitsu, judo, something like that, what's going to happen is they're going to show up and they're going to find out I suck at fighting. I suck at dealing with a person that's trying to drag me to the ground or push me into a wall. You're not going to learn how to do that in a weekend. You're going to learn some practices, some techniques, but that's not going to become some ingrained process. So if anybody's serious about fighting, not because they want to get in the cage or the octagon, but if you're serious in about it, the only way to get good at that is to go do it. I personally train anywhere from 300 to 375 hours a year just at the jiu-jitsu gym. That's a lot. It's a commitment about every other day. I'm there for several hours at a crack. It's a commitment to the tax it puts on my body. I'm in my mid-40s. It's a tax on time. It's a tax on finances in some ways because I travel to these different places to do it. And it's also a time suck when it comes to having to recover. Back to mindset, and I'll shut up. It begs the question, if you actually care about protecting yourself, then why are you not doing things to make yourself stronger, healthier, faster, harder? Not just harder to kill, but why are we not walking on the daily, eating better, getting better sleep, shutting the TV off, shutting YouTube off, shutting the phone off, and taking into consideration that if our goal is to live a long, full life, we want to learn to protect ourselves, then do all the other things to protect yourself too. Make sense?
I mean, that makes amazing sense. And the only thing that I will say is that maybe don't shut off the YouTube if you're watching the Carry Trainer YouTube channel.
Ooh, I paid him $20 to say that.
Well, that's absolutely enlightening. Thank you so much, Mickey Schuch of Carry Trainer, and of course, also you can check out the Higher Line podcast if you want to hear more of Mickey's dulcet tones.
Mm.
This is actually very topical. I mean, I know that's what you said, but earlier today I had an interview with a British journalist who wanted to talk about queer people and guns, and we were talking about both situational awareness and the fact that, just having a gun doesn't make you prepared to defend yourself. It's not that magical talisman, like we have said, but it's the knowing that you know how to use it and that you have it within you to defend yourself with every ounce of your being. That's what makes you confident and formidable.
Yeah. And actually on the same note, as I was listening to this to refresh my memory, I realized that I said a line that I was actually quoting from somebody else, but then there's a story attached to it. This actually comes from a friend who was vacationing in the Philippines, and he just went there on his own, just taking the sights. And he had been out one evening and was walking back at nighttime back to his hotel room, and suddenly he realized that there was a handful of teenage boys that were following him. And he realized they were following pretty close, and he was definitely getting that vibe. And he turned around and looked at them and said, "Do you think I'm the guy?" And when they realized that he was aware of them and not afraid of them, they just decided to move on. Could they have taken him and taken his wallet? And who knows if he had a whole bunch of money in his wallet or not, but it doesn't matter. Just the idea that people are looking for an easy mark. And so that absolutely is something to factor in. But of course, as Mickey points out, we all have bad days. So It's also good to train.
That story, that really makes me think of Amos Burton from The Expanse.
Tell me more. I haven't seen it.
Oh, you need to. So, The Expanse, it's a near-future, pretty hard sci-fi, and it's very well written. It's based off of James S.L. Corey. I'm getting the name wrong, but, Leviathan Wakes and that sort of thing. Anyway, it's fantastic. You should watch it. And so, Amos is the resident tough guy, but I don't mean a tough guy as in he acts tough. No, he is tough. And he's quiet most of the time. And he just carries himself. And when he decides it's time to cut loose, if he likes you or if he's feeling sporting, he'll give you a chance. Otherwise, he'll just lay into you. And so, that story, turning around and saying, am I the guy? It really vibed like Amos. It's like, hey, if you want to fight, we're going to fight. But is this something you really want? And I highly recommend it. In the wake of any tragic event, we all hurt for the victims, as well as feel a bit more unsure about our own safety. And this only gets compounded if politics, like anti-gun activism, gets mixed in.
Actually having a beer for this one because, well, as Weer'd and Erin no doubt have already talked about in the main topic. Kind of like when Oddball has to talk about politics. According to Merriam-Webster.com, gaslight, verb, to psychologically manipulate a person, usually over an extended period of time, so that the victim questions the validity of their own thoughts, perception of reality, or memories, and experiences confusion, loss of confidence and self-esteem, and doubts concerning their own emotional or mental stability. Anti-gunners are basically gaslighting people, especially the firearms owners, or trying to, that anybody with a gun, legally bought, an otherwise law-abiding citizen, is in fact a terrible person. That they maintain that a firearms owner is responsible for things that they have never done, would never even dream of doing, things that some sick bastard did that is hundreds, if not thousands of miles away, and that, in fact, the firearms owner would make all reasonable efforts to stop. But that's keeps going over and over again, being told how bad people are, being told that, oh no, you're going to be a bad person. You've got to be a bad person. You've got these terrible guns. The guns will make you do bad things. Over and over again, trying to get people to believe it. And convincing a lot of people, often voters in the middle of the road, to believe it. And it's really sick. They jump at the chance of something horrible that happens to inflict their ideals on others. And this is beyond the pale. I've been told by anti-gunner or gun butters that, you have to consider, take into account the emotions of the people involved. Where does my emotions count? Where do my own goals and state of mind count? They don't, for those people. Only they count. Firearms owners are supposed to subsume themselves into the will and desire of anti-gunners. It's, again, sick. It is a really terrible thing to do to people. And once you give up your guns, well, the next step is, your speech is violence. Your silence is violence. whatever your own personal goals are, you have to try to constantly keep up. The Red Queen's race comes to mind from Alice in Wonderland, where you have to run as fast as you can to try to stay in one place, which is the semi-good graces of the people emotionally abusing you, emotionally abusing a nation, because you can never be good enough for those people. You can never meet their standards. You can never do enough. This is why I find these events so depressing, because of these manipulations and the stresses that they put on me, as well as those around me. I probably shouldn't take it so personally, but how personal is freedom? How personal is being able to defend yourself? How personal is being able to defend those you love? It doesn't get much more personal than that. It doesn't get much more personal than having people blame you, accuse you falsely of things that you would have nothing to do with. All freedoms, ultimately, are individual freedoms. And as always, freedoms are innate. It is only whether or not they are recognized. Because freedom can't be created, it can only be blocked. Wish I had something a little bit more upbeat. Hopefully, in segments further down the road, I can be. Yeah. Oh, okay. Have fun. Be safe. I hope it gave you something to think about. Hopefully, we can all get together and think of something more positive soon.
I want to point this out to our listeners. Most of Xander's segments are scripted, and this one pretty clearly wasn't. It was very raw, and I could feel the pain and outrage and frustration in his voice. And, I mean, if you couldn't tell, that's how I'm feeling right now as well.
I mean, that's exactly my thoughts as I'm listening to that, and I'm hearing him, and I'm going, wow, this is going to be a heavy episode, and it really needs to be a heavy episode. And it just got me thinking about the fact that the one that I remember the clearest was Sandy Hook. I was actually at my father-in-law's house, and the news was coming through, and my father-in-law's current wife was a school teacher, and so emotions were getting really, really, really high. And I remember thinking of how horrible it was of all those kids being killed, but at the same time, I knew out there the anti-gun groups were going to be coming for me. And this was going to get turned around, and this was going to be used against us. And we later figured out that, Michael Bloomberg had Moms Demand Action, poised and ready to go. And it was just waiting for a school shooting, and this school shooting was the one. And it's really an awful feeling when you just want to hurt. And you just want to just give comfort, but at the same time, you know that we need to fight because the anti-gunners are going to be using the emotion as a way to push their agenda. Because, like I said, they know that when we're all signed mind, we never hear about this type of these laws when there isn't a shooting. We hear about. There's all these laws. There's always the people that want to get rid of the presidential term limits. There's always the people that want to legalize marijuana. There's all of these perennial issues that are constantly going up as bills, and they're going up as they're going up. But the gun control bills, they sit on them, and they introduce them or they reintroduce them in the wake of a tragedy, and because they know that they won't get the time of day otherwise, and this is the only hope they get. And so, I got to imagine it wears on the anti-gunners as well, because they're not allowed to mourn either. They're needing to mobilize and push and attack us. And so, I'm sure it wears on them as well, but well, I'm not sorry for them. That's their choice. Thanks to each and every one of our listeners, and a very special thanks to all our supporters on Patreon. To get on Patreon, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers Podcast to sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast, plus there's bonus content. Like we have blooper reels. We have the ACP film track where we record audio tracks for movies that you can watch along with us. And we have the ACP Mag Dump. I will say the ACP Mag Dump was done a couple days before this recording, and let me tell you, I'm very somber today. We let the rage fly there, and so if that's something that you're looking for, and will help you cope with this, then I highly recommend it.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
I have a blog. It's weerdworlds.com, and you can hear me also on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
I have blogs. You know where they are. I don't feel like talking anymore.
And you are listening to Nate Spencer's music. Thanks a lot, Nate.
He probably wants me to do something lighthearted, and I don't think it's appropriate. And so our senses of propriety, I don't know, run with it, whatever. They're assorted, and so is our podcast. Good night, everybody. Be safe. Hug a loved one.
No final words are said. Good night, everybody.